What's that? We're gonna get the heaviest stories in the series? Come now, you know better than that. Since when do Pokemon fans read? Hey, what's good, yo? Soul here, and welcome back to the story mode. So, if it wasn't clear, in the video game space for Pokemon, we are descending into official downtime era. I wouldn't expect another Pokemon Presents until maybe the end of this year, and even if we do get a big major Nintendo Direct, I doubt it's gonna give us anything significant in regards to Pokemon wins and waves. We'll probably get like the update and information in regards to like DLC for Pokopia or any major updates for Pokemon Champions, but other than that, I wouldn't really hold my breath. Which means we'll be tapping into filler for the time being. It seems that a couple of months ago in my scripts here, I wrote down the dialogue situation in modern Pokemon, apparently. Clearly it's been a while, and I have to imagine that I wrote this in my scripts because there was likely some kind of argument happening on Twitter or something like that. And it is exactly as my joke at the beginning states. Apparently, Pokemon fans don't read. So if anything, it's less of an actual direct dialogue situation and more of a people's problem with the dialogue situation. And what are the people's problem with the dialogue? Well, that is exactly what we're here to sit down and talk about. So why don't you go ahead, get cozy, grab a nice, cool glass of cranberry juice, get that fried machoke meat, put it on your salad, and make sure to drizzle it in mustard sauce. And why don't we talk about the apparent dialogue situation in modern Pokemon? So, first things first, what is the problem here exactly? I've seen a couple of arguments here and there about people getting mad at other people for not understanding certain story arcs or elements because they clearly weren't really paying attention to the story at hand in Pokemon games. This generally implies the idea that people are just kind of rapidly skipping through any form of dialogue and story within Pokemon games to get to the main meat of things, and not really going out of their way to understand anything. Now, if that is the case, and that is something that's happening more commonly than I realize, then if I'm honest, I can't really say that I'd be shocked about something like that, especially because this problem isn't really exclusive to just Pokemon. As an RPG fan, I have seen countless playthroughs and Let's Plays and people talk individually about certain games in which they had zero interest in the story or dialogue and just wanted to get to the main meat of things, and then they wonder later why they're confused. And then they wonder why the story's boring or why the characters aren't interesting. It's because they aren't paying attention. Not to say that there aren't boring stories or uninteresting characters out there in other RPGs or anything like that. I imagine it's kind of easy for you to fall off of a story if it's really that uninteresting. But I've seen cases of Persona, of Xenoblade, and a million other RPGs where people just did not care about the dialogue, and that was really interesting to witness. Now, in the particular case of Pokemon, since it's, one of the most popular franchises on Earth, it's definitely a much more damning issue. Because there are so many more eyes and hands on these games, they are a lot more susceptible to super heavy criticism, whether it's unfounded or not. Obviously, I think everyone, especially people who have actually played the games for themselves, absolutely have the right to their own opinion. Whether I agree with that or not, that's exactly what it is, their own opinion. Believe it or not, before Twitter, a lot of people were forming their own unique opinions. It's a real interesting place we live in. Anyhow, for example, during the prime time of Scarlet and Violet, I feel like there was a lot of back and forth about whether or not the entirety of the game was good at all. Obviously, there were plenty of very justified people that were just not feeling the quality of the game, it just wasn't up to their par or standard, and they just would not do it. The way that game released, a lot of people felt like the general quality of it was an overall insult to them and they would not put up with it. And that's fair, I completely understand that. However though, even past that, there were a lot of people that still went out of their way to play through the entirety of the game, and they would still say that overall the entire game sucks and there's nothing good or redeeming about it. And of course, in my head at the time, I'm sitting there thinking, wait, really? Like, the whole thing? There's nothing good about these games? Like, they're just complete cheeks overall? Am I missing something? Did we play the same game? Not to say that they're unjustified in their own opinion, nor is the game absolved of its flaws. It is full of them. I know, I've played through the game multiple times. Which is why I think that I can confidently say that the story in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is not bad at all. It has some weaker aspects to it, of course, there's no doubting that, but Bad? No, especially not coming hot off the heels of Sword and Shield, where the story was just non-existent. Now, one constant complaint I've heard every now and again in regards to Pokemon or any hefty RPG is how much dialogue there is in that game. And I've come up with a couple of thoughts as to why this might be the case, especially when it comes to something like Pokemon. Like I mentioned earlier, Pokemon is by and far one of the biggest franchises in the world, meaning that a lot more people are willing to get into it and play the games. That means it's constantly in the eye of the general widespread audience much more than other general RPGs, especially turn-based ones. Now, I'm very thankful that I found my way and found my love with JRPGs like I did, because I've come to understand how these games operate. Essentially, I have developed a let it cook mindset after years upon years of playing games like these, whether it be Pokemon or other RPGs. However, I have also played a lot of other games that are very much not RPGs. And when you compare and contrast how those games are played in comparison to Pokemon, especially even in the Nintendo space alone, you can see why there's such a major juxtaposition. Think like Super Mario Odyssey or Donkey Kong Bonanza, for example. Games like that get you pretty much right into the action. They don't waste time telling you much of a story. They want to get you in there. They want to get you playing, and they want you to have as much fun as humanly possible as soon as humanly possible. By the time you boot up something like Super Mario Wonder, for example, you are in and moving within the first 5 minutes probably. Because if there is one thing about Nintendo, it's that they are extremely serious about that gameplay over story philosophy for a lot of their franchises. Which can be absolutely good. Them focusing on gameplay more than anything makes it so that all of their games have usually been very high quality and consistent. But it can also be harmful in a couple of ways. For example, as much as I love Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, that philosophy kind of hurts the potential of those games to be pretty much downright perfect. But another potential situation that could have developed from that was the development of impatience in a lot of their player base. I have people in my life that I cannot recommend any RPGs to because they do not have the patience for long dialogue. Not that this is an exclusive situation to Nintendo fans, but usually if they are a very heavy Nintendo fan and they have grown up on stuff primarily like, you know, the Mario series or something like that, I usually stray away from recommending long RPGs with heavy dialogue. Not that somebody who's used to games like that can't break out of their shell and try out something different like a longer JRPG with more dialogue, but from my experience, it's kind of rare for them to break out that heavily. But for the most part, they are willing to take a look at Pokemon, considering the fact that that's a little bit closer to home in a way. Obviously, being owned by Nintendo, Pokemon is one of their biggest franchises. However though, because it's more of a co-ownership situation between Nintendo and Pokemon Company, they aren't as strict when it comes to those philosophies of gameplay over story. That, and especially the fact that they're trying to always introduce newcomers to JRPGs, and the result of that are games that definitely take their time to really thoroughly explain as much as they can so that everybody can have an even playing field. So of course, that's gonna create a little bit of a conflict, right? People who are used to pretty much being thrown into the fire off rip after booting up a game aren't gonna be as privy to games that really take their time with the tutorial to make sure that you know everything before going off on your own. And doing something akin to skipping or speeding through dialogue, especially in the early stages, can lead to a little bit of confusion and being lost in characters and story and things like that, events that they weren't initially paying attention to because they just wanted to get into the action. And then it's not nearly as much of a mystery as to why something like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's story didn't really resonate with them that much. They were skipping things that might have been actually really important and they didn't even realize it. Again, to clarify, I'm not saying that this is always the consistent problem. Maybe somebody was paying attention and they still just did not resonate with the story, and that's totally fine, but I could absolutely see a consistent situation like that one, where they just did not have the patience to really sit down and learn what was going on. You can't tell me that there wasn't a situation in which somebody just kind of burst through the game because they felt obligated to finish it because they spent a full $60 on it. It happens, and we've been in a rough economy for a while now, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's more common than you probably suspect. That being said, I don't think that that could potentially be the only issue that we have on our hands here. Another problem that pretty much nobody can deny is that in this modern era, attention spans are absolutely destroyed. Over the last couple of years now, people have begun to absorb content in any way, shape, or form in the shortest form possible. They get short bursts of entertainment, and that's how they like it. And because of that, they absorb it constantly, over and over and over again. And they essentially just get used to that, and they start to have a preference to absorb content like that. So naturally, the creatives within every space, whether it be movies, TV, video games, or even books, have taken notice to that. And of course, as this thing goes, they've had to adapt to that. Whenever you're trying to sell something within the entertainment space, the last thing you want is for it to be boring for your consumer. Which is why it's usually considered very risky nowadays for things to slow down a little bit, for them to take their time to tell a story. And it really sucks because those are usually the ones that do all of their building with their characters, with their world, and so on and so forth, the best. Now here's the weird thing. You can definitely take the risk of slowing down to tell a story properly and stuff like that when you have an established product. When people are ride or die for a series, they're usually more inclined to sit through whatever that new installment has to offer, which is usually what Pokemon tends to do. Within the first hour of modern games, they are taking their time to introduce you to pretty much every concept, but you know, not necessarily you and me, but the newcomers that are playing the game for the first time. I can't think of a singular franchise that explains its mechanics more thoroughly and doesn't really need to more than Pokemon, if we're honest. But you know what? Better safe than sorry. If there's a reason one doesn't understand what's going on mechanics-wise in a Pokemon game, it's because they likely just did not read through the tutorial like they should have. But that's just it. People don't have the patience for a super long, in-depth tutorial as much as they used to anymore. They're trying to get right into things. Newcomers are hearing whispers of the new Pokemon game and seeing clips of it on Twitter or TikTok floating around and thinking, you know what, maybe this does look interesting. Let me give it a shot. They start playing and they are very quickly fed up with the tutorial, with all the learning curves. They're just trying to get right into things. They get to a point where they just start skipping some dialogue because they figured, hey, what's the worst that could happen? I'll learn the game as I play. And then, unknowingly, they skip critical aspects of the story. They skip critical aspects of mechanics. They don't go out of their way to learn that stuff. And then we end up with a situation where they just couldn't bear the game because they could not put up with all the dialogue. I know, it probably sounds a little crazy to even think about the possibility that there's somebody that would just skip everything, but you know what? They're out there. And then you take a hard look at some of the modern Pokemon games that are lacking a little bit in terms of quality and on top of all of the dialogue that people have to read through, and you know, they're just not having it. You can call me an old head for this opinion, but I really do think that the general evolution of social media and how they output content now is the entire reason for this, but whatever. Another suspicion I have as to why people might have an issue with the dialogue is how it treats its players. We have had this conversation so many times now, I've probably lost track. So the long and short of it is, these games rarely acknowledge their older players. We've been playing these games for a very long time now, so being forced to go through those hour-long tutorials of dialogue of just teaching us what to do, even though we've known it for way too long now, can get quite frustrating for a lot of people, I very much imagine. Even then, I don't tend to skip dialogue or anything like that because I'm still getting to know the characters that are introducing me to this new world, so I let them do whatever they need to do. But if this is the frustration people who have been keeping up with the games are feeling, I can't imagine how newcomers, even if they are a little bit on the older side, are feeling about something like that. Feeling babied and untrusted to not be able to handle the game on their own. Again, my personal solution that I've been suggesting for years would be to just simply add a dialogue option, yes or no, to whether or not you are familiar with Pokemon, and then they should be able to let you go from there. But I don't know, people have proven that even then it may not work the way I think it will. Overall though, I could definitely see something like that adding on to the overall issue that people have with the dialogue. Another thing that could contribute to this is the fact that there is no voice acting. In the early days of my Pokemon career, I wasn't on the internet nearly as much as I am now, so I feel like it was a lot more rare for me to hear the very specific complaint of, I'm not trying to read a freaking novel, let me play the game. And obviously this wasn't a complaint that was exclusive to Pokemon, it was just a general RPG thing. People were just not trying to hear it. Or, you know, in this specific case, read it, I guess. But here's the thing. I feel like I didn't hear that nearly as much with RPGs that had voice acting. Maybe I'm crazy and wrong on this, you could correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I wasn't deep enough in the minds for Persona during its prime or whatever, but I feel like I never heard that complaint for Persona, which is marginally longer than Pokemon. You could definitely make the argument that the stories were better or the characters were more interesting, but one of the primary things that I have to consider is the fact that there is actual voice acting in those games. Modern Pokemon's biggest complaint from the general people is the fact that we don't have any voice acting, even though everything is already animated and ready to go like it should be there already. This can be immersion breaking for a lot of people, especially when they have to look away and read the text to understand what's going on instead of paying attention to the animations. And so, naturally, that anger is redirected towards the dialogue. There's a little bit of a resentment there because they are essentially forced to read. And like I mentioned earlier, this era is extremely impatient. Not a lot of people are reading books like they used to. So the common person is definitely a lot less willing to have to do that in their video games. And I bring up voice acting because I have to imagine that that blow would be at least a little bit lessened if they can hear the emotion from the characters, actually get a general idea of what they sound like and their personalities, and they would feel much more of a connection. But maybe I'm wrong, maybe it shouldn't make that big of a difference even if there was voice acting. I mean, people were able to easily connect with something like Phoenix Wright, right? But I don't know, maybe that's a crazy connection to make. Now, obviously, I'm a big reader. I don't have a problem with dialogue, especially if the dialogue is actually good. I'm still getting a general idea of the characters and the world through said dialogue. Obviously, in the case of something like Pokemon, I would still love it if dialogue and characters and story were continuing to improve overall, which I do think is very much the case, by the way. They have been telling some very unique stories within the world of Pokemon. But that's not to say that the dialogue situation isn't there. Obviously, as older players, we would like to be acknowledged a little bit more by having options and real dialogue choices that could help immerse us a little bit more. I think that overall voice acting can help us get much more connected to these characters because we can actually feel and hear and see their emotions. And in future titles, if they're able to tap just a little bit deeper into some heavier story arcs and things like that for certain characters, I think that getting people engaged enough to actually interact with the dialogue will be kind of a thing of the past. But hey, you know what? Maybe that's just me. So that just about wraps it up for this one. Again, you know, this is definitely pulling from the bank. This is a script that I wrote months ago, actually. This has been on the back burner for a long time, and I figured I would just kind of touch it up and just see where it takes me. You know, this one was more of a free flow type situation, believe it or not. But I just wanted to see what, you know, this conversation could bring. Maybe you feel very differently about it. You know, that's what the channel is all about. It's all about conversation. Maybe you're feeling like I'm wrong about this. That's what it's all about. So let's have that conversation. But before I do my outro stuff, a quick thing of note, I did actually, this is super ironic that I'm talking about this. I did start a TikTok account recently, and I'm gonna start posting clips on there from either this channel, from my second channel, from my group gaming channel, Gaming is Culture. I'm just gonna start posting like stream clips and stuff like that just to help build it up, and then I would like to start multi-streaming a little bit more between that and YouTube on my second channel for other games and stuff like that. Obviously we could do that, you know, here as well whenever I do stream Pokemon related stuff. Obviously we're gonna take a lot of this year during this downtime to get into a lot of different things, whether it be fan games, whether it be some retrospectives, and whatever other media we could talk about in regards to Pokemon. So we're just gonna have some fun this year. We're just gonna, you know, play it by ear, see where the wind takes us, and just talk more in general about the state of Pokemon, like this here, like the modern Pokemon situation. I've got another one in the bank, pretty much scripted and ready to go, so I'll touch that up. That'll probably be the next major video, but I do want to do a response video for you guys talking about the gimmick that we could be expecting for Pokemon Winds and Waves. So again, make sure to pay attention to the community tab. Hopefully we could get something going this upcoming week. So lock in, let's get her done. But all right, that's enough rambling from me. Enough of a shameless plug. At least I saved it till the end, right? But either way, I'm passing the mic over in your direction, and I want you guys to tell me everything that you're thinking in the comment section below. Do you agree that we are witnessing a dialogue situation in modern Pokemon? This is something that could heavily affect the future of the series if it's not somewhat dealt with or managed in a better way. Maybe some of the suggestions that I've made here today could be a better way to alleviate the situation for newcomers and older comers that are not as invested in the stories as they could be because of the dialogue situation. Or am I off my rocker? This is an imaginary situation. Nobody has a problem with this, and we should stop talking about it. Tell me everything that you're thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I'm always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, Yes, ma'am. It does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm gonna go ahead and do just that. I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gone. So thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!
Like this, like switch, like